Hello dear students, today we are going to deal with the types of succession, and before we get started, let's take a look at what we have so far discussed about succession. In the previous part, I told you that succession is an orderly and sequential process in which one plant community is being replaced by another plant community till a climax community is achieved over a period of time. Okay, uh, without consuming much of your time, I will directly move on to the types of succession. Succession has been divided into different types depending upon the criteria which we have employed. Okay, and the first criteria used to classify succession is the nature of area which is being colonized. Okay, so depending upon the nature of area which is being colonized, succession is of two broad categories: the primary succession and the secondary succession. First of all, primary succession. Succession that starts on a bare area in which there was no previous record of any vegetation is called as primary succession. That means if succession occurs on a complete bare area, okay, in which previously you do not have any sort of organism there living, okay, that type of succession is known as primary succession. And the organisms that initiate the process of succession, they are known as pioneers, and these pioneers, they build the substratum, they create conditions which are favorable for the next coming organisms, which are favorable for the next coming vegetations. Okay, and you have a second type of succession that is known as secondary succession. Okay, secondary succession is that type of succession which occurs on an area which was previously occupied by vegetation, but due to some natural or human factors, the area has been deprived of its vegetation, it has been deprived of its organisms, and if succession somehow starts on this area, this type of succession is known as secondary succession. And you have to remember one very much important difference between primary succession and secondary succession, that is the secondary succession is relatively fast as compared to primary succession, because the soil which is already lying in the area, it has the necessary nutrients as well as a large pool of seeds and other propagules of organisms. These things make secondary succession relatively fast as compared to primary succession, because in primary succession you do not have a fertile soil, you do not have soil, you do not have propagules, while as in case of secondary succession you have the necessary nutrients in the soil, you have a large pool of seeds and other propagules of organisms, and because of these reasons succession takes place relatively fast in secondary succession. Depending upon the medium on which succession starts, okay, succession has also been divided into different categories depending upon the medium on which succession starts. The first one is hydrosphere, that type of ecological succession which starts in those areas where water is available in plenty, example ponds, streams, bogs, etc. And the second one is holosphere, that type of ecological succession which starts in saline waters or saline soils, that type of succession is known as holosphere. And the xerosphere, ecological succession which takes place in extreme environments where you do not have enough water, where the environment is very much dry, that type of succession is known as xerosphere. Samosphere, it is that type of ecological succession which starts on sand. Okay, and finally you have lithosphere, it is that type of ecological succession which starts on the surface of bare rocks. Okay, and these are the types of succession depending upon the medium on which succession starts. And finally you have another way of classifying the process of succession, and that is the nutritional status. That means depending upon the nutritional status of the initial stages, you have two types of succession: autotropic succession and heterotropic succession. इसका मतलब ये है the depending upon the nature of the pioneer stages, okay, depending upon the nature of the organisms which first colonize the area, you have two types of succession: autotropic succession and heterotropic succession. Autotropic succession is that type of succession in which the initial stages are dominated by autotropic green plants. Okay, if succession starts and the pioneer stages are represented largely by the green plants, that type of succession is known as autotropic succession. And you have to remember one point, that autotropic succession occurs in those conditions, in those cases where the medium contains a large amount of inorganic nutrients and least amount of organic materials. याद रखना बेटा, autotrophic suction वहाँ पे हो जाता है where the environment contains a large amount of inorganic nutrients and a least quantity of organic materials. Okay, and the second one is heterotrophic suction. In this case, the initial stages, the initial seral stages, they are represented by, they are dominated by heterotrophic organisms like bacteria, fungi, etc. Okay, and you have to remember that heterotrophic suction occurs in those areas in which you have least amount of inorganic nutrients and you have a large amount of organic matter. याद रखना बेटा, you have a least amount of inorganic nutrients and you have a large amount of organic matter so that bacteria and fungi can survive there. Okay, this is all about the different types of suction, and there are many other ways of classifying suction, but for the sake of convenience and considering the time constraints, I will sum up here, I will sum it up here. Okay, and in the next class we will start the process of suction.